decided to feature our band on the 3rd season of the show.
Wow.
Of MTV. Yeah, which was amazing.
Wild.
So it was like, there were all these crazy things happening like during that time where I became somewhat like acquainted with Travis Barker in high school. And I remember always watching his show on MTV, Meet the Barkers. And then we had this TV show on MTV come in at the same time. And there was a lot of these like weird serendipitous situations that happened from like putting me into Travis's world that ended up happening in my own world as a kid, which is really crazy stuff that we can jump into if we want. But that was the cool moment for me though, to like be on that show. And we signed a record deal to Sony Epic when I was 17, like when I was a senior in high school.
Wow.
And like got to make a record and went down the process of like seeing all that stuff start to come to life in more of a real way from when I was like a kid taking lessons at 6 to like now being in a band at 17 that signed to Sony Epic, and seeing a lot of kind of the fruits of my like, you know, goals and labor start to pay off a bit.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot that comes after that, but that's kind of the cool beginning part of like,
I think
life.
That's a great place to, you know, stay on course, but veer a little bit, because man, like hearing that story, it is really cool for me, because that whole vibe you're talking about, I was pretty much at the same time. We're closely related in age. I was on the East Coast watching that whole scene unfold, and like seeing it from across the country, very minimal social media, internet those days. But that scene was so out there already. So for you to be like in it and make it, right? Like you actually got a deal, you did it, you hustled. There's a lot to unpack in there alone that we can probably make some parallels to your business and your life now.
Yeah.
But like one of those things that is a testament to you obviously getting that deal and getting on the show and all those things that obviously helped continue and grow upon, but networking, right? I'm sure being there's a lot of people, you know, a lot of people think either I'm from a small town and like it's going to be really hard for me to get noticed, or I'm from a major city and there's so much competition. Either way, they're two ends of the spectrum. But like, how did you network and make yourself and your band stand out so that you stood out to labels and got a deal like that with MTV, or even had kids come to your show and know who you are? Like, what were some of the things that drove you to set yourself apart? Yeah,
it was like a bit of craziness and a bit of like kind of like the right side of my creativity brain, which I'm very lucky to have, but then I'm also, I would say, even more lucky to have kind of like a left brain side of things too, in the way that I think in terms of like business and putting things together, and just like extremely driven to see things through, just like yourself, you know, and build stuff. And so for me, like early as a kid, it sounds funny, I literally had like a notebook, I had like a binder, and I had all my stuff in there of like notes of things that I wanted to do to like progress my situation forward. So it was like, cool, I met this one guy at the first Roxy show, his name was Maston Kip, I remember his name still today, and like haven't talked to him in probably 15 years. But Maston Kip was like one of the first guys at the show that was like, oh wow, like it might have been like our first or second or third show. I remember meeting him in Los Angeles, and he was a music manager that worked for a management company called The Firm. So I was like, cool, like I have no idea what this is, but it sounds interesting. It sounds like why wouldn't we entertain the idea of a manager that can push like the music and the career potentially forward? I had no idea, but I assumed that could be something just to intertwine with and get a part of like some other ecosystem and other bands that are a part of that, and potential tours that can come off of that, and potential people that could come onto our songs and all of it. So I just remember hitting him up. It was like, cool, call Maston Kip, like step number one, you know? And there was a bunch of those type of things where it was just over time, I just like really had like almost like a checklist, you know? And it sounds super basic and simple, but I think that helped me in the process of just like writing stuff down to make sure those things happen. But in the process of writing that stuff down, it was like the act of manifestation of making that stuff start to come true.
100%.
And I really believe in that. I really believe in the power of like true manifestation, of putting your mind and energy mentally into these places. Like if you want something bad enough, like you know what it feels like to want something bad enough and to have the chip on your shoulder, wherever the chip comes from. I think the chip's important because it drives you to be able to like check those things off, make sure that those things are happening. And so for me as a kid, I just had that, you know, and I think that like I didn't see anyone else that kind of was doing that stuff. And for me, I really became kind of like our own internal band manager to make sure that the things that we wanted to have happen would happen. And I was really the only one kind of thinking about those things. Where I think the other band members were more like like kids in school, like surfing and skating and like, you know, kind of dicking off and whatever, and coming and playing at the show. But I was lining up all the rehearsals. Like the rehearsals would happen at my house. I was always the one making the phone calls to make sure that everyone was coming to the rehearsals and like scheduling stuff and just finding things that like popped their heads out and like going after them in a methodical way. I remember one of those things like actually being like, we got to play at K-Rock Weenie Roast in 2005. So Open Air Stereo got to play that show, and I remember Travis Barker was playing for the Transplants at the time, and so I saw him there, and he was always an idol for me growing up through the drums. I just approached him and like was like, hey dude, like I want to take lessons with you. Like was just up front. I was like, you're my favorite drummer on the planet. Like what would it take to have lessons with you? Because I had read in a drum magazine that he gives lessons, you know? And so I just straight up asked him. And I think he had seen me at a couple Blink shows because I'd always go backstage. I made this relationship with little Chris, like his assistant, and like they would always kind of find me backstage and pull me in to like hang out and stuff. And he was always super hospitable and cool. But he agreed to give me lessons, you know? And I think a bit of that was just like the determination and like there's no chance that you're not going to give me drum lessons. Like we're going to make this happen. And it sounds crazy because you can't tangibly, like it's hard to tangibly understand that of why those things happen sometimes. And sometimes they don't. Not every time, you know, the Travis Barker of the world's going to agree to give you drum lessons. But I think there's a lesson in that for a lot of young people where it's like the determination and the mindset to be able to like bring things to life. I think starts as simply sometimes as just writing those things down and making sure that you're checking things off and putting yourself in the winning situations, which starts with so much of how you think about things and feel about things.
Dude, that so well said. And like I was going to say and try to like pin off of that, but you went all the way there. It's like, not only are you putting them down to hold yourself accountable, it's a checklist of like, when this happens, then this can happen. Don't forget it, but hold yourself accountable to do it. And it's there. Like I'm an obsessive personality, so I
know
would do
you
the
are.
same.
I know you
I
are.
do the same. And when I first started building drums, I will never forget. I called another pretty popular drum builder, sent him an email. He called me. It was a Sunday afternoon. He's like, "Give me advice." But the biggest takeaway was give yourself a 3, 5, 10-year goal and write it down, and look at that all the time. And through my career, seeing those things happen, I started really getting into manifestation and energy and speaking to the universe and putting it out there. But also, like you said, the determination of we're going to make this happen. And by you doing that confidently, it's not an ego thing. It's not a this is going to happen because X, Y, or Z. It's like you're literally putting that energy out there where it's like that other person's going to feel it. They're going to feel it, and they're going to want to be a part of it because they're attracted to your, it's like a magnetic confidence. That's good. It's like ego's away on that. So that's,
it gives me chills talking about it right now, just hearing you talk about it.
Dude, it's
it's
so
like
powerful.
A real thing.
It really is. I literally was at my dad's house a couple weeks ago, and he's like, I'm clearing the basement out. I was a pack rat when I was a kid, so I had all my old tour stuff, and I found a couple journals, and I was reading them. And same thing, dude. I like so many parallel like situations. I feel like with many people out there, I'm sure. But no one really talks about that. So I'm glad you brought those specific instances up, because so many of the young musicians and creators that want it so bad, they have that drive and that passion, but they don't know what to do with it. And it is as simple as writing it down and holding yourself accountable. And it stinks sometimes, but you do have to hold other people accountable, especially when you're young and it's like, oh, I want to go surf or skateboard. It's like, cool, if that's where you're going to make the most creativity for yourself in the band, then okay, I'm going to handle this. Let's all just have a shared respect for it, you know? And it's harder for kids these days with the internet makes things seem like, oh you just did it and it happened. It's like you forgot that 10 years that dude was in a van, you know, sleeping on the floor, and like it wasn't always that. And that's the building blocks of making it even possible to be in the limelight or on the big stage or whatever you want to call it. Right?
It's almost it's like sounds corny or whatever, but it's hard to like believe it until you see it. You know, and like when I started to have these little small wins happen where I was like, oh wow, like, you know, the first manager that I reached out to, we actually signed with him. You know, that when I first started to tell that story, I didn't really, I guess, come around full circle, but we ended up signing with him. And he introduced me to another guy named Matt Beckley, who ended up being a big part of our band early on, who produced like the first 2 albums for us, and was just like
Yeah.
a pinpoint to helping our band expand, and was pinnacle in a lot of the MTV stuff that ended up happening. So it was like literally one of the first things that I had written down to do.
Yeah.
Like opened up all these worlds and like, you know, expanded on 10 to 20, 50 other opportunities because of that. I took that
Yeah.
first step, you know? And so, but once you actually feel it and see those things start to happen, it makes it easier to understand it, because I feel like a lot of young people probably have a harder time of like grasping this, but until you actually do it and feel it and like put yourself in the situation you want to be in. Like,
Yeah.
what's the best, like highest level of energy and awesomeness that you feel like
Yeah.
you want to be in? And if you really believe it
Yeah.
and you really want it enough, like you'll figure out how to make it happen, and
For sure.
those things will start to come to life for you. I remember one of the big things that I used to do all the time was I would like literally sneak into Verizon Amphitheater in Irvine, because I lived in Laguna. It was like a 20-minute drive. I would
Yeah.
take my truck. I would literally hop the fence. I would sneak in there, and I would just go sit on the stage looking out at
Wow.
like the whole amphitheater, and I would just
Wow.
sit there and just
Like,
be like,
not sneaking into a show, just going
no,
into
just
the
by
venue.
myself.
Just-
Yeah, it was wild. Like, dude, I used to go
Wow.
walk around like Verizon Amphitheater, like by myself.
And
I'd
just
sneak in,
visualize,
dude,
yeah.
and just like go to the amphitheater and sit there and just like look at all the seats and visualize like this is where I want to be.